if I was to just paint a certain picture of myself, the highlight reel of sorts, like social media, we all kind of put out the way that we want to be perceived. Happy, adventurous, all that sort of shit. I don't think the underlying messages I'm trying to get across would come through. They wouldn't hit as hard. And so, yeah, feeling pretty vulnerable at the moment. The last two stories, no good. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, my friends. It's not all doom and gloom. I think we go through these certain patches in life that can really send us down a new path. And that particular period in my life where I was running amok, well, thinking about it now, like I've been a bit of a prick the whole way through. And then only really in my mid-20s did I start switching on a bit more. Still some room for improvement. Not sitting up here on my high horse saying I've got it all figured out. That couldn't be fucking further from the truth. But I've realised that it's not until, well, for me personally, it's not until I started looking back and reflecting on who I was and who I want to become, where I went wrong, where I went right, and what I want to take forward, etc., that the real growth came. So, yeah, that period where I was a little bit of a bully, fucking arsonist apparently, amongst other things, that was a time in my life where behind the scenes, I was excelling in sport. I was doing well at school. But looking back on it now, it's these dark sort of stories that I can't help but feel inclined to share, because there's other people that might get something out of it. Like, you're not going to get a whole lot out of me saying, oh yeah, I went to nationals for cross-country running and competed for the state in all these different sports and I was a sick cunt. Like, there's no point in sharing that sort of stuff. So much more to be gained from these failures or these things that we regret. So yeah, we're kind of in that period of life where I'm like halfway through high school, going through puberty, all that sort of stuff, starting to get a lot more interested in girls. And isn't that a head fuck at that age? But yeah, the whole fire incident, that was a massive wake-up call. And not long after that, the timing of it all now, reflecting upon it, is kind of freaky. This government subsidised program got rolled out and it was called Switching Tracks. So how the program worked, 2 students from every year group, a male and a female, were selected to go on a week-long camp. Sounds great, right? I wasn't that keen. I'm like, I don't want to go on a camp with all these randoms. My mates aren't going to be there. I don't even like anyone that's going. And my parents really encouraged me to go, even though I didn't want to. So out of character for me. Anytime a camp usually would pop up, I would jump on it. Any excuse to get away from school and go on a trip, I was all in. But this one, I knew my friends weren't going to be there, and it had a weird feel about it. Only 2 people from each year group got selected. That's of 100 plus students. And I was the only male in my year group. And I remember we all kind of had to meet up before, and they told us what it was going to be about. And even just in the name of the program, Switching Tracks, it said it all. And I looked at the other people that had been selected, and to this day, they never said to us, this is how we've selected people. But they picked people that were going down the wrong track, but had a little bit of potential. Well, that's what I reckon anyway. All the other students there, it was a motley crew of naughty kids, to say the least. But there was people that were really good at music, really good at sport, really good at art. But again, they were in the wrong crowd and they were going down the wrong path. And so I got selected for this program. Eventually, my parents twisted my arm into going, and I went. It was a 5-day thing out at a retreat on the outskirts of Canberra. So it was like on a property, and it was a beautiful outdoor location. There's a tennis court, plenty of activities to do nearby. And yeah, went along the first few days. Everyone was kind of like very reserved and like still too cool for school. Their persona was up on flare. The walls were up. And as the week progressed, as we spent more and more time outdoors, going on hikes, we went caving, we did some rock climbing, the group sort of slowly started coming together. And you had 13-year-old kids there, and you had 16-year-old kids. You had kids that were sneaking out at night time and playing silly buggers with one another, if you know what I'm saying. And then you had year 6 kids that didn't even know what sex was. And so you've got the elder kids that were caught up in the drug scene, and then the younger kids that were just flat out little shits. And the first couple of days, no one was really interacting, and then started slowly coming together. They even had psychologists and police come in to do talks with us, and so we'd sit in this big hall and police officers would talk about their career path and how at our age they were doing similar silly shit, and by finding a job that they liked, now they had purpose and they had sort of come out of the dark. And it was amazing. Like, it was such a pivotal trip. And as I said, the first few days, everyone had the walls up. They didn't want a bar of it. They were like, we're only here so we're not at school. And then as the kids started sharing and we started hearing these stories and we started getting around one another and really getting immersed in the outdoors, the walls came down. And not everyone came out of the darkness. Some of the people that went on that course never came out of the dark. Like, they are probably in a crack den somewhere now, or dead. Who knows? But I can tell you now, there's a few of them that it didn't work for, like I felt like it worked for me. And the significance of this trip, and the reason why it was so important to me, is because it's only recently hit me that that has played a huge role in me wanting to get people outdoors and immersed in nature, getting people to talk about how they're feeling, because that was one of the first times I'd really done that and been exposed to, you know, a group education format where everyone is being vulnerable, talking about their feelings, talking about where they've gone wrong. And it was such a safe and supportive environment. And a lot of people don't get to experience like that ever. I'm lucky where I've always had 2 parents that are willing to have tough conversations and listen and tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear. But there's other people out there that haven't had that privilege. And so hopefully by sharing this story, people can think of their own ways that they can implement similar things into their life, and take what you want from it. But spending time outdoors, creating time for you to digest all of this content that you've been consuming and really catch up with yourself, is one of the key reasons why I think people get so much of being outdoors. You go out there, you've got no phone service, very little distractions, and often it's the first time for the week or for the month that this internal dialogue slows down and we've processed a lot of this bullshit that we've been thinking about, and an overwhelming sense of stillness and calm comes over us. And we can actually start to think about stuff that means something to us, opposed to thinking about what he's doing on Instagram and what she's doing with her ex and all this other stuff that really doesn't matter. And so by going outside and sometimes just doing something that is not even necessarily physically or mentally demanding, like you can go outside and you can like climb and push your grades and try your hardest. So yeah, you can go outdoors and use it as a canvas as you wish. I like getting a bit of a blend, so sometimes I go outdoors to really push myself and be forced to be in the present moment, thinking about that next step, thinking about the next move. And that means there's no space to be anywhere but in the moment. So much growth that can be in that place, and so much fun when you're fully present in the moment. But I also use the outdoors to create stillness and to get clarity. And that might be when I'm going for bushwalks. So doing a cruisy jog or a slow paced bushwalk over a few days where I actually have time to let my body take over and do what needs to be done to get me from A to B. That's when I find I'm most creative, and I actually have time for some of these lessons that have been, marinating around to actually truly sink in. And so if we're constantly scrolling on Instagram, consuming YouTube content, always surrounded by people, we don't necessarily have enough time to soak in all these lessons and to really capitalize on them. And I think that trip that I went on back then was the catalyst for me pulling my head out of my own ass and realizing, hey, maybe one day I could be someone that helps facilitate trips like this. Maybe I could return the favor that the people at Switching Tracks have given to me by inspiring people to talk about how they feel and get outdoors. And there's not a linear path. It's not an ABC step to figuring this shit out. And that can be a bit confronting, but it's also a good way of taking the pressure off yourself. Just by starting, going for a walk somewhere you've never been before, opening up about something that you've never spoken to anyone before. Far out. It's just like every time I do these things, just a little bit of a weight off my shoulders, a little bit more of a weight off my shoulders. And the longer I spend out in the bush, the more I get immersed, the more I drop into the place, the more content I feel in life. And then before you know it, straight back in the deep end, million things going on at once, trying to keep the wheels on, working, training, seeing people. And then I feel, the anxiety and feeling the world getting a bit more of a grip on me. And then I'll go back out into the bush and it's another reset. And so there's this cycle that I find myself in, that no matter how much time I spend out in the bush, I'm still going to get back to society, and eventually it's going to start getting a hold of me again, and I'm going to lose that version of myself that I love. So I need to keep going out and refreshing it. And I don't know if that's a sustainable cycle, but so far it's the most effective one I've found for me. And one thing that I want to emphasize, if I'm continuously going out and all I'm doing is challenging myself and pushing myself where I'm forced to be in my body and I'm forced to be 110% present, that's not enough. Not only do I need time outdoors where I'm challenging myself and pushing myself, there needs to be the opposite of that, where I'm going out and I'm chilling and I'm soaking it up, catching up with myself, and I'm just enjoying being out there. And so getting a bit of a blend of that, I think that's super important for me anyway. So Switching Tracks, the idea that they selected 2 people from each year group and took them outdoors to work on themselves, is that still a thing? Why aren't we funding this shit on a larger scale? It was imperative that I went through something like that. And in a way, I'd been fortunate enough to go through very similar things on a smaller scale leading up to that moment. My parents taking me on camping trips, going on camping trips with friends. But to actually have that as the sole focus of the trip was really important. And part of the reason why I want to talk about it, because we can replicate that by ourselves. Maybe not to the same extent, but going out with friends, loved ones, professionals, guides, whoever, immersing yourself in the outdoors and just being open to new experiences. Nature will do the rest if you put in the time. I can guarantee you that. But if you think that you're going to walk out your front door and do the same 3-kilometer walking circuit that you've done for the last 10 years, and you're going to have a profound moment of, oh, this is it, I reckon the chances of that light bulb moment coming when you're stuck in the monotony of doing the same shit same day, I think is a lot lower than if you're going to go out in a new inspiring place, challenge yourself and allow yourself to have a bit of time. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with doing the same 3-kilometer circuit every day. I'm not saying that you can't have these profound epiphanies when you're just rolling through the motions of everyday life. But for me, these light bulb moments happen when I'm in inspiring places and when I allow myself a bit of time to welcome them in. And so what I mean by that, if you always go, if you always have your headphones in, if you're always chatting away, you don't just sit still just for a moment to let new ideas come through, to let old ideas sink in, you're going to miss them. But yeah, as per usual, rambling on. So, okay, I think that's enough for the 6th episode. The letter F, the battery's about to die on the camera. I still don't have a name for this episode. Flick the switch, F. That trip flicked a switch within. The fire story definitely played a part. A bunch of things played a part in that switch getting flipped. But this trip, the government subsidised trip to send us out in the bush for a week, that flipped the switch. And I hope it encourages other people to go and spend some time outdoors and flip the switch in their own way. It doesn't have to be a monumental shift. It could just be flipping the switch and shifting your perspective on something ever so slightly to become more empathetic, kinder, more honest. I don't know what it is. That's up to you to decide. But yeah, far out, it's actually quite nice to talk about a more positive story. That's a wrap. What are you going to flick the switch on?